how I got started in entrepreneurship, I think it started a long time ago. My dad was an entrepreneur when he came to Canada as an immigrant, and he was in software, and then he decided to start a franchise kind of corner shop, and that's kind of where I grew up. And I was always, it was really fun just to grow up and eat candy and read manga all day. But that was a bit of my childhood. But I think it really changed my dad in terms of seeing how he was able to empathize with his customers, even though he was just selling them candy and cigarettes, and just it really changed his life. And he began to kind of question what he was doing, and it led to a lot of internal transformation. I think so. From that experience, I moved to Vancouver, and I think one of the first few times I was able to practice empathy was actually going to a film festival in White Rock, and they basically have a social justice lens, and so I was able to learn about different issues in the world, and those all require empathy to think about, how does my life relate to someone in another country who's facing challenges around poverty, or even the Indigenous community in Canada, or the environment. Like, how do I feel empathy for nature, for example? So these were all really interesting things that were percolating, I would say. And I think going into entrepreneurship, I didn't know it was entrepreneurship at the time, but in high school I started a composting service at my school, and basically tried many different things, and it didn't work for about 2 years. And then one day I said, let's do a pilot, let's do some iterative design, and decided to get out there, have my MVP, which is just a compost bin in the cafeteria and me standing beside it and telling people where to put their trash, and try to learn from people, why do you put stuff in the trash, why do you put stuff in the recycling, and that worked actually. And the administrators, there were so many concerns, and they were okay with my little pilot, and that actually grew and became a full-time initiative. So I would say that's one of my first few feelings of entrepreneurship, and just feeling empowered to create a service that benefits people. But I didn't know it was called entrepreneurship at the time, and I think it took until about Business 238, Techie, to really dive into empathy and entrepreneurship. Business 238 was my first really good experience with really formalizing empathy and understanding the frameworks to understand it. Like, they teach you about empathy and empathy maps for your customers. And over the last kind of 10 years, we actually closed this initiative in 2019, but we were working on an interfaith distribution of food and clothing to the homeless in Surrey. So worked a lot on that initiative, and we're able to pull together a very diverse group of people to basically provide home cooked food. And part of that, I was able to align with Biz 238, which is how can we understand better the lives of these people, and understand how can we provide better sanitation services. So I think that was a really cool exercise in speaking to people who maybe are quite different from me, and understanding what is their needs, what are their needs, how do they feel, and can we create something that's provides empathy, but is also equitable and just as well, in the context of the history of how people are treated when they're marginalized. Totally, yeah. I think I can talk about my dad for sure. Both my parents actually, but my dad for sure, in the sense of wanting to find a purpose in his life. So he was a software engineer, decided to become an entrepreneurship. He ran a business, it totally failed, had to start over life again, and went through maybe 5 or 6 different iterations of what a career would look like for him, until finally becoming an interfaith chaplain, which was totally something new for him. So I think that key of trying to find your purpose and trying out different routes and being iterative about that is really parallels to entrepreneurship, I would say, is where you're trying to find the problem is, you're trying to find a solution to a problem, but you try out many different solutions before getting to that. So yeah, I think he would be one of the really people that I really look up to, and for sure. So it's been essential in 2 different ways. One way I would say is being able to, it's been essential in my personal life, as well as my work life and all the initiatives that I do. In terms of my personal life, it's you think about, I have 2 siblings, and my grandma lives with us, so everyone has different needs, and even within the family, just understanding who needs what when, and like how can I relate to my younger sister who's 5 or 8 years younger than me, just like on a day-to-day. And that's been something you kind of grow up and learn it as time goes, and same with my partner. So I think empathy is, to the day-to-day level, it's super important. I think from a perspective of business and entrepreneurship, it's even more important. Being able to connect with your customers on a really deep level requires empathy. It requires understanding the world from their perspective. It's not how you deliver value in your mind, but it's how do you deliver value in their eyes. So to get to those kind of really clear insights about where to drive your product next, or how to plan out your strategy, empathy is super critical as a tool and a mindset, kind of coupled with active listening and all these really important techniques to be able to drive your entrepreneurial projects forward. So I think it's super critical. There's a few different processes, and I think in mapping an audience's needs. So one is defining your audience, and that takes some time. So when you define your audience, you might think something very general. So say you're selling a service, maybe it's a B2B company, so you're selling to small business owners, but then that's too general, right? So you want to then segment that market and understand, okay, what are their needs? So what are kind of the demographics, the psychographics, and sort of their financial situations that you want to map out. So even in defining your audience, you need to have some idea of what are their needs and what is their personality. So you need empathy in that process in terms of understanding who your audience is in the first place. And then from there, you would require empathy in user interviews throughout the whole process. So you can do user interviews, you can do surveys, you can kind of watch them do the tasks that's maybe they're using your program. You can watch them navigate your program, things like that. So all those kind of activities require a sense of understanding from their perspective what their needs are, and opening yourself to new perspectives as well. So I think it's really critical in that sense, towards one, mapping out your audience first, and then also mapping out their needs and the problems that they face. I think some of the really good advice I've received was around validation. And I think initially when you're developing a new solution, you might feel as an engineer maybe like the pressure to design something that's really good and it's totally works for all the use cases that you have in your head. And I think one really good piece of advice was, you know what, like, why don't you just do this all manually? Like, why do you need to build a full software program just to test your idea? So we were able to really leverage tools like Airtable and a few other small lightweight solutions to kind of test out different ideas. And I think that was really critical feedback, and just knowing that you can do that and actually provide something meaningful of value to your customers and also to you as a company in terms of learning. So I think that was a really amazing piece of feedback, and that was from another SFU alumni startup, talent marketplace, Steve from there.